Several people seldom consider waste management as a stock. You presumably equate waste management with a truck that drives by your household once a week, picks up your trash, and then disappears till the next visit. It is really not a fascinating firm, and it doesn't appear to be the type of investment you'd find in a smart portfolio. However, this corporation is a corporate behemoth. It is the world's biggest trash disposal corporation, with a market capitalization of more than $60 billion. That indicates it is more valuable than Twitter. For today's video, we will examine the $1.8 billion waste management fraud scandal. But first, please accept my warmest greetings if this is your first time at the Smart Stocks Academy channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell next to it to be the first to know when a new video like this is posted. If you're ready, let's talk about the video. Waste management is a prominent stock among institutional investors and high net worth individuals wanting to safeguard their capital. It is because the waste management industry is regarded as so secure that shareholders are willing to pay a premium for each dollar of profit. As a result, regardless of the fact that it is not expanding, it has very high price profits multiples of around 40 times. Bill Gates is one of the largest single investors in waste management, with more than $2 billion in shares in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's portfolio. The sense of safety and stability has resulted in an ultra-secure job security, great pay, and in many ways, easy work for those in upper management at the corporation. However, it does not stop them from committing one of the most massive accounting scams in U.S. company history. Garbage management was established in the early 1970s and swiftly developed to become the world's biggest waste removal company. Up until the early 90s, they had an annual sales and net income growth of more than 30%. Part of this expansion was aided by aggressive accounting, as they described it. When there is a question about whether an item should be documented in the current accounting period or pushed to the future, aggressive accounting takes the approach of always pushing it to the future. In that very same way, revenues would better be documented sooner rather than later. Positive business reporting was pushed forward as much as feasible, while bad business reporting was pushed back as much as possible. While this is a tricky issue, it's easy to be tempted to go overboard, especially after 2 decades of doing it. The company's phenomenal growth narrative began to hit some headwinds in the 90s. When it comes to disposal and how to deal with toxic waste, environmental rules were growing increasingly rigorous. Dean Buntrock, the CEO of Waste Management, wants to keep the company's record and reputation as a high-growth company alive. To do this, he and other high-level executives were encouraged to commit accounting fraud by the relatively brief Wall Street reporting. Using aggressive accounting with non-hard expenses is one of the simplest ways to inflate business earnings. Depreciation, for example, falls under this category. If a company relies on physical assets for its functioning, such as a fleet of trucks, such resources will ultimately wear down and need to be replaced. The corporation is supposed to report the estimated consumption of the remaining life of those assets as depreciation over the expected life of those assets. Typically, companies employ a time period for how long a property is projected to last and the asset's salvage value when it is no longer operable. Then, they use that information to determine how much its value depreciates annually. One of their most valuable assets in waste management is their garbage truck Inventor. The operating units of waste management assumed that each garbage truck had an 8-year functional life, after which it was no longer worth anything. This is the assumption they used to figure out depreciation and consequently operational profits. Any small changes to this statistic would have a major impact on the company's profits. The top management of Waste Management began by boosting the anticipated useful life of garbage truck by 50%, and then adding an unexplained salvage value of $30,000 in each truck. This was unjustifiable, and the executives were well aware of it. As a result, they disguised it behind corporate walls and kept the practice a secret among the upper echelon. They employed this method to reliably meet quarterly earning targets. They also altered the amortization value of dumps by arbitrary percentages up to 10%. These ruses resulted in the abolition of hundreds of millions of dollars in costs. They also used an explicit accounting gimmick in which they reserved reserves into revenue. These so-called sweeps combed the company's financial statements for any reserves for liabilities or future costs. For instance, if they had money set aside on the balance sheets for accidents or the prospects of having to pay out workers' compensation, they would take that money out of the balance sheet as income. Arthur Anderson, the company's auditor, became more concerned about the company's accounting tricks by 1992. They wrote to senior management claiming the company's operating unit's genuine performance was being obscured by top-level accounting modifications. They instructed Waste Management to place all corporate earnings adjustments in the authority of the different operating units, but the company's management resisted. Rather, they increased top-level accounting modifications until they accounted for over a quarter of total revenue by 1996. Upper-level officials authorized the creation of an internal document in 1994 to back up their biggest accounting forgery: the lifespan and scrap value of their dump trucks. They had a business buying agent write a statement justifying the vehicle's 12-year lifespan and the salvage value of $30,000. Despite the fact that the statements were not backed by any actual research or facts, the memorandum was still written. The following year, a separate division of the business conducted the research to officially determine the true figures. They discovered that the salvage value and functional life of the dump trucks were substantially lower than the accounting gimmicks used by the company's management. And when the management learned of the study's findings, they instructed all traces of the study to be obliterated, and all computer files related to it must be erased, and the research must be terminated permanently. The study's findings were never shared with the rest of the corporation. And in addition, Waste Management employed deceptive accounting techniques to make certain corporate expenditures appear less terrible than they were actually. Obtaining licenses for new landfills was one of the company's primary expenditures. The procedure of obtaining approval failed at some point, and the cost of pursuing the permit should have been recorded as an expenditure. However, in an attempt to conceal the fact that these mistakes were occurring, management would lump those costs into other landfill initiatives as costs for other operations. They would sometimes amortize the charges over a 20-year period, and other times they would just not record the spending at all. They just left the cost on the balance sheet without ever recognizing they were liabilities on the income statement in these circumstances. This provided investors the misleading impression that these failures did not even exist. Furthermore, rather than recording losses, waste management companies use environmental liability reserves to pay operating expenses. Because the corporation was often on the verge of being sued over environmental concerns, they had set a large sum of money to cover these possible costs. And this was in accordance with standard accounting rules. Management in the corporation, on the other hand, exploited these reserves to cover unrelated overhead costs. They substantially avoided having to dedicate money to these environmental liabilities in this way, despite the fact that it was not lawful. However, these accounting techniques did nothing to address the company's root issue of declining commercial performance. Eventually, in the late 90s, shareholder pressure drove the previous management out and replaced them with a new group of executives. And the deception was promptly discovered by the new management. Steve Miller, the new CEO, indicated publicly that the company's former accounting procedures will be reviewed, and the stock of waste management companies dropped 10% in a single day as a result of this revelation. And the stock dropped another 20% when he announced his departure. The restatement of financials was massive when the examination of the company's financial was concluded in February 1998. It was the biggest restatement of results in corporate American history to date. A sum of $1.87 billion in net income was recalculated. Depreciation of vehicles and equipment was the most significant single item. The restatement came as a shock to stockholders who had lost roughly $6 billion in value as a result. While the company's stockholders were being hammered, the scandal's perpetrators were handsomely compensated for the company's performance. The annual bonuses offered to senior management were in the millions of dollars. Bonuses for the CEO alone totaled $3.5 million. Furthermore, the executives dumped enormous sums of shares into the market in the years and months leading up to the scandal's revelations. In August of 1997, for instance, the CEO sold $4.5 million in stock just before the company's restatements were revealed. As a consequence of his personal stock transactions, he avoided losses of $4.3 million as a result of the stock price plummeting once the controversy was revealed. Other executives implicated in the scam escaped losses by selling shares before they were disclosed as well. The SEC formally charged the top officials implicated in the scam in March of 2002. These executives settled with the SEC for more than $30 million 3 years later. However, the majority of the figure was paid by Waste Management, and the chairman at that time only had to settle $2.3 million. The general people, however, appeared uninterested in the settlement due to the dull nature of this industry. Waste Management stock has made a significant comeback since the controversy, and it is now worth roughly 10 times what it was when the scandal was first discovered. Investors appear to have entirely forgotten about the time when the greatest accounting scam in corporate history occurred. And that ends it for today's video. To express your love and support, click the like button below if you haven't already, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to be the first to know when we post a new video. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and we hope you enjoyed it. We look forward to seeing you in a future episode.